So thank you for coming. This is just a brief introduction to Commonwealth. I hope I won't talk more than half an hour, and then we'll just Q&A and stay as long as people want to. You notice behind me the little moss wall for UBI. The origin of this work was 4 years running at UBI Works. Most of you know UBI Works. That's probably why you're here. We're continuing to do that work, promoting a guaranteed basic income with not much of an emphasis on the U in UBI, but more focused on purely anti-poverty relief. But in the context of doing that work, I learned a lot about some of the historic bases of basic income and some of the wider trends driving poverty, and realized that there needs to be a conversation in the country about some of the deeper reforms that might lead to what we call Commonwealth, which would generate dividends, income for people as a byproduct of that, which could work in concert with the guaranteed basic income. So, but we'll get into it. We're here today to solve two problems that are preventing us from having a society where progress benefits everyone. And these two problems are deeply interlinked. One of which I'm sure you've all heard a lot about already is automation. And a key takeaway is that automation is reducing the income of working people. It is decades of stagnant wage growth, which we'll go into a bit more in a bit, as well as cost of living, as you all know, is going up and up, with the primary factor being housing costs. People are working harder and longer and getting less in return. And as a result, if you put all these together and look at the broad economic trends, we're in a ownership economy. This is not a wage-based economy where everyone can benefit from working hard. It's people who own assets of all kinds, whether it's real estate or stocks or art, are the ones who are benefiting most. And that's just not fair. In general, it's more profitable to own things than to work and be innovative. And one of the problems is that more automation is going to mean more inequality of property. Wealth inequality is skyrocketed. And fundamentally, a big insight for me in my basic income journey was that inequality of income is rooted first and foremost in inequality of property. So if income is being made more by owning things, then shouldn't part of the solution be some ownership income for everyone? Like literally in an automating economy, income flows less and less from people, from work, and more from property. So many economists, futurists, have looked at this problem, including leaders today in the artificial intelligence movement, and believe that we should have some kind of form of property income for everyone to complement our income from work. In addition, we have to reduce the cost of living. Look at our economic relationships to things like land, which are the primary driver of people's costs of living, and find ways to reduce the costs of land and housing. And it turns out that these two solutions are actually deeply interlinked. And I'm going to go into that in a moment. So, what we're for is a national investment fund that can hold property, stocks, and bonds, as well as a land value tax to reduce the cost of housing broadly in the direction towards taxing what economists call unearned income or economic rents, which is becoming a bigger problem as our economic system is shifting more towards income by platform owners and owners of property as opposed to work. And there's really not much of a conversation about that in Canada at the moment, although there is internationally. So we want to kind of push that conversation, not in competition with basic income at all, but really focusing on a very different problem where income, dividend income happens to be part of the solution, but isn't actually the main point. Because we believe that these policies will create a world where work is rewarded more than ownership, where the housing market is permanently affordable, environmental sustainability is baked into our economic system, and we've reduced poverty substantially. And something that's near and dear to my heart is we created a society where progress benefits everyone. So that was, I believe, 3 minutes of an overview. And now we'll go into the actual presentation, because I always get annoyed at those presentations that bury the main point until halfway in. So now you know what the rest of the 25 minutes will be about, and I'm going to go into slides and try and prove these points that I've been making, and then we'll have a long and fulsome Q&A where we can all talk with each other and go deeper on some of these concepts. Okay, one moment, just going to share screen. Okay, great. So, so Just to, before we get into that, we do have two upcoming community calls. This is an introduction call that we're on, and the speakers for the upcoming community calls, you can see here on May 23rd, as well as on Thursday, June 22nd, are speakers who are going deeper into some of the themes that will be introduced today. So if you'd like to attend these, I highly recommend, or you can register during this call while I'm talking at the link below, commonwealth.ca/community call. I'm really excited about these speakers, and we'll go deeper in our learning journey with them. So what are we for? I mentioned briefly before, a national wealth fund, something that simply owns forms of property on behalf of all Canadians, and a land value tax, which in effect would make the value of land a form of commonwealth, and that could also be shared through dividends and reduced income taxes for working people. So this kind of shifts the language a little bit. It becomes not necessarily a basic income to reduce poverty, but property income to give everyone some ownership income and to reduce the cost of housing. These ideas are inspired in large part for me personally by Professor Guy Standing, who's the founder of the Basic Income Earth movement. And he says, regrettably, much of the public debate on basic income is focused on it as an alternative, a form of social protection to existing policies. But he sees it as a social dividend, a shared return on the commons, on natural resources that should belong to everyone, and not only as a response to poverty. And this was deeply inspiring to me because it points to what are the deeper problems in our economy that are driving poverty and inequality in the first place. So we're very much for basic income now. That's why UBI Works will continue its activism to address poverty, income inequality, modernize the social safety net, give people time in transition. But we create a commonwealth to separate the conversations and not confuse these issues, so that we don't harm the basic income movement, but we can still have a fulsome discussion about the financial causes of poverty and wealth inequality, and really give everyone a share of the economy, a share of the upcoming artificial intelligence revolution. And these two policies work very well together. We can have dividends from shared wealth, which is an underlying source of income security upon which the entire social safety net is built. It would make a guaranteed basic income less expensive if the income guarantee is built on top of dividend income from some kind of shared wealth. And so we see these as complements. So getting back into the matters I mentioned earlier, some of the proof, automation by and large is lowering wages for most people, unless you're in the top 10 to 15%, 20% of income earners. Research has shown that 50 to 70% of the changes in the wage structure in the United States, and obviously here and in other places, is due to automation. We're all seeing projections of hundreds of millions of jobs potentially lost around the world. And this happens to me personally. My father and uncle were in Ontario's automotive manufacturing sector. And when we had automation wave in the early 2000s, in response to competing with China, they lost their careers because there were simply no more jobs of that type left. And we see that people whose jobs were displaced by automation typically get lower income work after that, work they were not trained for. I would also argue that globalization, the decline in unions, are both linked to the rise of automation, and this is going to continue and it's going to accelerate. We see that jobs aren't working. Working people are getting less and less of a share of our economic output. We've seen stagnation in real wages for many decades, and this is overall middle-class jobs are not being replaced. We're creating what's called an hourglass-shaped economy, where we're growing in income and low-wage jobs, and we're growing in very high-wage jobs, but middle-income jobs are disappearing. And this is going to get worse and worse. So, I would argue that if you want to know what artificial intelligence will do, it'll do more of the same and a lot faster. So just imagine how much lower the share of income that goes to working people will get, and how much inequality that will create, how much wage stagnation will result from that. So that's what's happening to people's incomes not growing. And then at the bottom, we're contending with rising cost of living, with Canada leading the world in rising home prices, but you can see the trends all over the world in terms of rising costs of homes and costs of rents relative to people's incomes. So this is becoming untenable. You know, we're not seeing wage growth. We're seeing expenses get more expensive, and it's creating a lot of despair, where people are working harder and longer and getting less in return than their grandparents' generation and parents' generation. Put these two things together, and it creates an ownership economy where we see very few people taking in all the wealth. Here in the US, the top 10% own pretty much everything, and the bottom 80% own almost nothing. With, of course, the 1%, 2% of the people own most of the nation's wealth. And in Canada, we see the bottom 40% owning basically nothing, and the bottom 80% have only 33% of the wealth. And what does that look like closer to home? Well, we have situations where assets, in this case homes, are making more money than jobs. And this is the situation we saw during COVID. It's just a fast motion replay of how the housing market has worked for decades. It's why a lot of people want to buy homes as investments, because they keep going up in income, in appreciation. And so all in all, you imagine this on all other asset types, and we're seeing ourselves living in an asset-based economy, not a wage economy. And those two trends interlink in a way to accelerate this problem. Because people in the top end of the income earnings sector, income earners just buy more stuff because they can, including more property, and that makes inequality worse and makes life more expensive for everyone. So looking at these problems, we think, well, if income is increasingly being made without workers, and all the money is going to assets, well, what about some ownership income for everyone? Perhaps we can have something we can conceive of as common wealth. It gives everyone an equity stake in the wealth created by nature and society as a whole. And this is a view shared also by Sam Altman, who's the president of OpenAI, which is leading the world right now in artificial intelligence innovation, that the best way to reform a system is to make everyone an equity earner. So we conceive of this idea, we call it common wealth, that can live together with public wealth and private wealth. There's nothing socialist about it. It's actually recognizing that a large category of income is actually made absent of labor. It's made due to control of scarce resources, scarce assets. Economists call that form of income economic rents, and capturing rents for the benefit of all is a form of common wealth. And we see that as a reform that's really neither socialist nor capitalist. In fact, it rewards innovation and prevents the kind of hoarding that leads to rising cost of living. This idea has roots very deep in history. Thomas Paine was an American revolutionary who said there are two kinds of property. There's natural property, which comes to us from the creator of the universe, such as earth, air, and water. And then there's artificial or acquired property, the invention of men. He believes that, the natural property should be shared equally, and property created by people should not. Really quite simple. And this thinker has inspired a lot of the basic income movement. I remember talking once to Carl Widerquist, who's a longtime thinker in this space, and I asked him if he's a Georgist, which is someone who believes in land value tax, and he said, "No, I'm a Painist." I'm like, a Painist? And he was very surprised I didn't know about Thomas Paine, because this is really the origin of a lot of the inspiration in the basic income movement of having an equal share in nature. And if you look at just how much that matters, land value in Canada is worth over $6.4 trillion. A lot of attention is paid to billionaires and billionaire net worth, but it's actually quite small compared to the asset that is actually driving poverty. Because it is high land values that drive poverty, not Elon Musk. And I know that sounds funny, but it's our landlords are creating more poverty necessarily than the billionaires. Now, I am in principle, of course, for progressive taxation, but the conversation in this country has been so absent looking at the impact of real estate and land on driving poverty. And I think this is where a conversation really needs to begin if we're going to have a big impact on poverty, particularly since it is quite possible that, absent of very strong rent control and other forms of protection that even social assistance income supports could eventually lead to, could eventually go down to subsistence levels as rents continue to rise, just as they already have over the last 30 years. And that's a big problem. We need to find a way to tame how the housing market works. So the two policies we are promoting, first is an investment fund for everyone. It's nothing really unique about it. There's already pension funds. There are over 60 sovereign wealth funds that already exist worldwide that save citizens money, mostly through lower tax. But we think that's a mistake. Why not have a wealth funds that they give people dividends directly? Alaska has been doing it for decades. It's very popular. They have a permanent fund that owns all kinds of property. And we see in countries like Singapore and Norway, they have sovereign wealth funds that are worth as much as the world's top 10 richest people. What an extraordinary accomplishment, if you think about it. That these countries that are like, economies are 8 times smaller than Canada's, could have amassed common wealth in the same quantity as the world's top 10 richest people. Now, these funds, Norway's initially came from oil royalties. Singapore's came from a variety of sources, trade budget surpluses from state-owned companies that were transferred to the fund from real estate and land, because Singapore is a huge real estate owner, and things like 80% of Singaporeans live in government constructed property that are leased from the government. So these are ways that you could build commonwealth that benefit people, and that could actually pay people dividends instead of just being used to cover for budgets, state budgets. So how could we actually do that? Well, around the world, we've seen these funds created through use fees on public property. If that is public, then why shouldn't everyone benefit from it? Public-private partnership equity. There's been a big movement about how we socialize the risks but privatize the rewards. So early stage research funded by universities. A lot of that equity could go into such a fund. Inheritance or estate taxes. If when the super wealthy pass away, why not have 50% potentially of their estates go to a Commonwealth fund that everyone gets, so the next generations can benefit? Budget surpluses, if we ever have them in this country. Typically, we hear about eco taxes on non-renewable resources. This is where you hear a lot of research been done, like oil. I would argue that the minerals, no one put the minerals in the ground. There's a component of that profit that should belong to everyone. Many people believe that all pollution taxes should also go into a fund, which then eventually shares the proceeds so that future generations can benefit or be compensated for the loss of today's pollution. And from a automation perspective, these are some more edgy ideas. If we really are moving towards a future where we have mass unemployment or it's happening too fast, it's the view of many leading thinkers. Sam Altman from OpenAI believes that there should be a share levy where large companies with over $1 billion in revenues, who obviously are the best beneficiaries of artificial intelligence, should have a 2.5% annual tax on their actual shares, which means they would have to create share dilution, 2.5% new shares, and put them in a fund where everybody benefits, as opposed to necessarily a tax on those corporate incomes. And that would be a way to have artificial intelligence directly benefit everyone. James Mead, who is a Nobel Prize winning economist, who was also very inspiring to me, he frankly forecast all of these things. He forecast that wages would be dropping in the context of rapid automation. And one of his ideas is we should create some sort of funds like this that everyone can own to create shared property. And one of his ideas was, he said it in different words, but effectively is print money and buy assets, which if you think about it is not that crazy, because if you buy assets, they appreciate in value, versus the debt which you created yourself stays the same and gets diluted over time versus the growth in the assets. So these are like just sort of emergency solutions that I want everyone to know about when the time comes that that automation gets this out of hand. And of course, something that frankly I wish we had right now is levies on monopolies, oligopolies, anti-competitive behavior. I think maybe all of us should have some share of Rogers and Bell, because our cell phone bills are so high, and that's clearly a result of oligopoly behavior and not earned income. That's a different way to address long-standing anti-competitive behavior. The second idea is a land value tax, shift in dividend. So the idea is that, tax land value, which effectively making much of land's value a form of common wealth. So why would we do that? Well, because speculation is driving up prices to unsustainable levels. And it'll always be that way because it's always been that way. We've seen speculative behavior because we treat homes as an investment. The prices keep getting bid beyond working people's incomes, and I'll talk a bit more of that in a moment. And from the perspective of commonwealth, of getting a share of nature, land value is community created. Gains from technology and societal progress and public investments end up in the value of land that were not created or earned by the individual owning that land. So a land value tax is not even really a tax. It's paying to use something that society itself has collaborated to create its value for. And you're paying to use something that you're removing out of circulation for others to enjoy. It would also keep land prices permanently lower. By some of our projections, depends how high the land value tax goes. And I'll talk a bit about that in a moment. So, bottom line is that a society with a fairly high land value tax will have permanently lower cost housing than a society without it. And where would the money come from? Well, we say from a tax shift. We can reduce income taxes on the first $40,000 of income, actually have no tax on everyone's first $40,000 of income, and still pay $3,600 a year in individual dividends to every Canadian. Or you could do it the other way. You could go full UBI, where it would be over $7,000 in income, in dividend income or rebates to every adult in Canada, including renters, coming from the shared value of land and no income tax cut. Or it could go the other way with all income tax cut. It kind of depends on the politics of whatever party hopefully eventually thinks of running on these things. So at this stage, we're quite early in these ideas. So why is this land value tax? Why is it so important to the mix here? Well, there's two reasons to buy a home, and these two reasons are completely at opposite ends. People need to live. There's demand that by people who need to buy or rent just to live, and then there's businesses that are offering homes to rent as a service, and these are all legitimate needs. But the second reason is in conflict with those first two. There's the desire for wealth creation due to asset appreciation. It's that we see homes like we see stocks in the stock market. And this expectation of growth is continuing and fueling more price increases, as we've seen during COVID. So in any economic system, and this is borrowed from Martin's talk from a few weeks ago, you can fulfill both desires of growing this asset to benefit investors, as well as reducing the price of homes. You just can't. So we're living with this fundamental cognitive dissonance, which you can see in the polling. Homeowners want prices to go up, and everyone else wants the prices to go down. That's roughly 61% polled here want prices to stay the same or go up. And this is why our political system is almost conspired to continue any policy that will raise prices higher and higher, which is really screwing the next generation. We feel that there's not enough of a conversation in the country about the impact of speculative demand. There's a lot of talk about supply, but demand due to not just speculators, because really there's no speculation. We all know that land prices always go up. It's everyone's expectation that prices will continue to rise that is having us overbid on prices and having us overuse cheap and plentiful credit that's created for us to do that. So during COVID, we saw small towns that typically had very little impact on prices grow by over 5 times in home price. The populations there didn't grow by 5 times. So clearly it's not a supply issue, it's something else. It's this expectation, it's homes as an investment as opposed to a place to live. But meanwhile, we are convinced that supply is where we have to invest. Of course, we always need more supply. Of course, we have to do rezoning. But look at a case of Vancouver, where housing units have tripled since 1960, but the population has only doubled, and yet housing prices have quadrupled. Like, how do we explain that? And meanwhile, new construction has been outpacing new family formation for a while, and wage growth has been flat, which is really tragic. Flat wage growth for over 50 years, while prices have quadrupled. So the supply narrative, I think, really needs to be challenged because there's other things going on. And a land value tax would successfully reduce the speculative demand for homes because you'd be paying annually. Instead of paying higher income taxes, you'd be paying for the annual value of land so that there'd be less of a return as appreciation happens. It would basically completely eliminate the incentive to buy and hold real estate just for the purpose of price appreciation. So we've done some modeling at Commonwealth with the help of a lot of experts around the world. And based on if we shifted our tax system to have a 17% tax on the value of land with introduced over 20 years, we would see land within a very short order immediately reduce in value, like by almost 76%. And land would take 22 years to come back to its permanent price. But on a permanent basis, land would be 76% cheaper than it would have been in an economy that doesn't have this high of a land value tax. So this is a permanent reduction in the cost of land and the cost of housing that many argue would increase our productivity, because on the supply side, a land value tax encourages the highest and best use of land. It discourages vacant lots in cities. It encourages increasing densification. So as well as reducing the price of land, it also encourages more supply, which is kind of what you want. And on an individual basis, if you look at the impact of this rollout, it would reduce house prices. This is the average house in Canada by 30%. And it would basically be rolling back housing prices by 7 years, which is very controversial, right? A lot of people have a lot stuck in their equity. Of course, there'd have to be some sort of compensatory or some sort of countervailing forces to help with the transition. But many experts believe that the fall would happen fast, as you can see in the graph. This is 0 is the point where the tax is announced, even though it's announced to be rolled out over 20 years. But the market would respond quickly because land would be worth less and nobody would be willing to pay as much as they did before. So the modeling shows that the fall in land value would happen very quickly as the market reacts. And then you'd see a continued slow and steady growth just due to supply and demand for families and economic growth. But again, it would remain 76% lower permanently at that tax rate. So one of the first projects we did at Commonwealth is to create this report. It's on our website that tries to estimate the total natural resource rents. This is the total annual potential revenue collection from what economists consider economic rents or unearned income across all forms of nature in Canada, which land, of course, is the largest one. And these are forms of revenue that could be used to pay a dividend, citizens' dividend, and or to reduce income taxes for those with the least wealth, and comes up to about 287 billion annually. Now, this is not money that could be had overnight. This is assuming a long-term reform that changes how we value and who owns nature while maintaining private sector incentives and maintaining the economy mostly as it is. It's just shifting the notion that nature is something, the profits from nature should benefit everyone equally, as 100 years of classical economists had believed. So what could we do potentially with that amount of income? And of course, this is hypothetical because it's not that, again, it could be done next year, but that eventually with this type of revenue, there's different philosophical views on this. On the one hand, there's the Thomas Paine, on the right side, the pure UBI view, share it equally, which would mean $9,000 a year of a dividend per adult. On the other side, perhaps on the far left, perhaps it should be inverted. One is probably seen more left wing, one might be seen more right wing, would be the views of Henry George, that you can eliminate nearly all income taxes and by sharing and paying for what we use out of the earth instead. Or a middle ground that we've been promoting at Commonwealth Canada is a middle ground, is eliminate tax on the first $50,000 of income, which would benefit those with the least amount of wealth, and rebate back the rest as a $4,500 a year dividend. Now, this is only from the rents that emerge from nature. This does not also include if we created a sovereign wealth fund the way Singapore and Norway and Alaska have, that would add to this. But this is just, again, to open the conversation. So as we conclude in these ideas, many people have thought about this problem and have come to the same conclusions. Again, OpenAI's Sam Altman, we need to design a system that embraces this technological future. And the assets that will make most of the value are companies and land. So we have to find a way to fairly distribute the extreme wealth that will be created as artificial intelligence evolves. Mariana Mazzucato, a great economist, talks also about a citizen's dividend, recognizing that a lot of the wealth we have today has been co-created by society, especially from natural resources or from public investments in technology, and that should benefit everyone equally. Karis Roberts from the Institute for Public Policy Research, again, sharing this idea that we should have a collective ownership of part of the country's wealth. And if we can own some wealth in common, a sovereign wealth fund like that could be a force for reducing inequality and share the returns to capital more evenly. And coming back to, again, my personal hero, Guy Standing, proposes a commons permanent fund, which would come mainly from levies on use of nature. He calls it commercial intrusions into the commons, and boosted by land value tax, eco taxes, taxes on large digital platforms, as a way to give everyone a share of some ownership income. So before I end and we go into Q&A, I will address a question that has come up so many times, is how would these ideas address Indigenous concerns? We are in the process of consulting and finding partners in Canada's Indigenous community to give their insights on land tax and some of these ideas of redistributing or of sharing in property. But there are two tribes in the U.S. that have come to the same conclusion, have come to the conclusion that paying of a land tax that then benefits from lands that have been taken, that benefits these tribes, could be seen as a form of reparation and a form of justice, because if the land was taken, people should pay for it so that no one benefits. Well, they're not asking for a full land value tax as we are proposing, but in the case of a full land value tax, no one would really benefit from owning land. They'd only benefit from what they do with it. And sharing in that value is seen by these two tribes as a form of potentially of reparation. So looking ahead, what do we want to do? Build a network to amplify some of these ideas, with writing and speaking and eventually campaigning, producing content to educate a new generation on concepts of economic rents, support research, which we've been doing a lot of already on our website on rents and related topics, start presenting around Canada. And again, doing that not really in opposition to basic income, not even really talking about basic income. The point of this is housing reform. It's shared property. It's a different conversation, which is a gap that we were hoping to fill. So invite you all again to our next community calls, where we hear from these speakers going deeper on some of these topics. I'm very excited to hear from Stefan Horn. He was one of the maybe one of the only PhD researchers, that's not true, one of the leading PhD researchers looking deeply into the role of economic rents in economies. And Brent Rinaldi, who literally wrote a book called Commonwealth Dividends, which is a strange coincidence because we thought of that name many years ago. And he's a really good book, so he'll present on that. So I'd encourage you to add questions now to the Slido. And we will stay as long as you want. We'll have the official close of the call at 3 Eastern. And then we'll stay as long as people have questions. Pretty much on previous calls like this, people stayed a whole additional hour. If you have the energy for that, so do I. And we'll stay and we'll have a chat. So thank you. And Chelsea is going to share the survey link in the chat right now and several more times over the next hour. We encourage you to take the survey and just let us know what you thought about these ideas. If you'd like to volunteer or contribute, you can fill it out while we're doing the Q&A, and you'll get an email about it afterwards. So we're at the very beginning of this journey. We don't have a clear strategy of where we're going to go with it. We just think it's indispensable that the conversation needs to happen. So that's what we're about. Let's go to Q&A.